Morning, Knox friends. It's coming up on 8 o'clock here in Rapla, and I'm returning home from morning prayer with a couple of friends. We get together in the mornings, pray for the church, pray for those that have slipped away, who we're concerned about. But it's a beautiful fall morning, and I thought I'd begin this worship service with just a walk through town as I head on home. The text that I want to focus on this morning is from John 2. It's the first miracle that is recorded in the Gospel of John, the first of Jesus' miracles, and it's the famous miracle of the wedding at Cana. And it begins with this moment of of incompetence. And as I was thinking about it, reading through this passage, what came to my mind was incompetence dreams. I'm not sure if you've had incompetence dreams. I have them all the time. I know people have various categories of dreams that are kind of recurring for them. And for me, maybe because this is one of my greatest fears, I have a whole genre of dreams that are incompetence related. So, the kind of thing where you'll be prepared, have prepared for something, have built up to something, and then just at the wrong moment you find that you've left something out. So, a typical situation will be that I dream that I've got some kind of presentation or some kind of presenting a paper or presenting a sermon of some kind, and I've put all sorts of work into it, and I've polished it, and the words are all just right, and the gestures are timed, and everything is down to the moment, precision. And I'm ready to go. And I arrive on site, and I step up into the behind the microphone, and as I begin with my electric introduction, I notice that everybody's looking at my middle. And I'm thinking, come on, man, where's the eye contact? And as I proceed, I realize that there's something wrong. And so I look down, and I realize in that moment that I'm completely naked. And having worked so hard on the presentation, I forgot my own clothes. And clothes tend to be important. I mean, I know this point can be argued, especially the further you get from, the closer you get to Colbert and the further away you get from Spokane. But incompetence, that at just the moment where you need things to be right, some key element, some key ingredient is missing. And this story of a wedding begins with an event that would be supremely embarrassing. I mean, it would be the equivalent of the president giving a speech and realizing that they're naked. I mean, it's something just where you've built up to this moment that needs to be perfect, and just before the culmination, just before things reach their zenith, you realize that something has been forgotten, something is missing. In this particular situation, we're talking about wedding culture. This miracle happens in the context of wedding culture. And a young man and his wife are getting married. This is happening in the village of Cana, which is, of course, not a large place, a small village, and there's some debate as to where it actually was, where it was located. But it's somehow close to Jesus' own family. His family has been invited. His mother is not only there, but she's also somehow kind of wrapped up in the doings and the happenings. When the wine runs out, which is of course the crisis, Mary, along with the servants, becomes aware of this. It could be that she's at catering or something like that. Who knows what the deal is, but Mary is somehow involved, and so who knows, this might be Jesus' cousin or something like that. Jesus has been invited. His disciples are also invited. So it's a family affair, but as would be typical of those days, the wedding involves basically the entire town has been involved, and what's prepared for them is a 5-day feast. It's not like our weddings. I remember when we had our wedding banquet, after our wedding, after our ceremony, we had this wonderful reception that lasted, as Estonian receptions do, lasted for hours. It went to the wee hours of the morning. And all these traditions involved, and some of you were there to see it. It's something to behold. Well, that was a one-day deal, and in this context, we're talking about weddings that last days, up to 5 days, and it's quite likely that this has already been happening a number of days. I'll check out here and link up in just a second. So we have a wedding that's been happening now for days. We're into the third or fourth day, enough so that the wine that was procured for the event has been consumed, but it's not okay, because really the wedding is reaching its final culmination. The ceremony, actually, the way that this works is a little bit different from ours. Our party follows the ceremony, but in the Jewish culture, there was a procession to claim the bride, where the groom would go to the bride's house, would take the bride, and then they would move to the party, and the party would last for days, and I imagine would be all sorts of traditions and things involved in that. But this was a multi-day affair, and at the end of the entire thing, they would go off together and begin their life, consummate the marriage or start a home or whatever the case may be. But in any case, it would culminate with their saying goodbye to the party attendees and moving on into their lives. And so when the wine runs out, it's running out at the most inopportune time. It's right at the moment where you want to have wine for a toast, and there's none to be had. And so this really is a crisis. And at this point, Mary turns to Jesus, and she does so, I'm sure, because she has some sort of expectation that he can do something about it. Maybe she imagined that he would be something of a master of ceremonies and would stand up and say, "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your wine glasses and move with me to the whatever." Maybe that's...
ootas sahtli põhjas seda õiget momenti ja...
Maybe this is what she had in mind. It could also be that she had in mind something like what Jesus did, something more miraculous. We know, if we read the Gospel of Luke, that she was visited by an angel before Jesus was born, and so she had some sort of expectation that he was capable of doing something more than just being a good leader, a skilled leader, that he was, in fact, destined for the salvation of the world, which is a pretty big deal. So she had some sort of expectation that he could help in a situation like this as well. And yet, his response to her is very interesting. "Woman, what has this to do with you and me? My time has not yet come." 3 parts to that, each of which is curious, especially of a young man speaking with his mother. Of course, at this point, he's not so young anymore. But still, he's speaking to his mother, and it's not a bad thing that she's recommending. So why does he respond in the way that he does? So I imagine there are a number of reasons for why Jesus responds in this way. One reason, I doubt this is it, but just imagine your typical New York Jewish mother. I can't even do the accent. Anyway, up in his business, "Mom, what does this got to do with me?" Maybe that's part of it. But, really, this reference to her as woman, as opposed to mother, is not as offensive as it may sound. He says the same thing when he's making his way through the streets of Jerusalem and he sees his mother. And he refers to her as woman, but it's a sign not of the fact that he's rejecting the title of mother, but that he's referring to her as somebody that he sees as an equal, maybe, or somebody that he has a different kind of relationship with. I think that's part of what's happening, is that he's recognizing that there's a shift in their relationship. A mother is concerned with advancing the reputation and ensuring the reputation of her son. And at this point, as Jesus is beginning his ministry, it's no longer important that his mother be guarding his reputation. He is now in charge of determining the timing of things, when he begins to demonstrate what his power is and what his purposes are. And so in some ways he's choosing a way to refer to her that emphasizes the fact that he's now in control of his ministry. Part of what's going on here is that Mary is both his mother, but she's also become his disciple, or becoming his disciple. And so he's relating to her in a different way. And this term that he uses, this idiom that he uses, what does this have to do with you and me, is in Hebrew not quite as abrupt as it seems in English, or Estonian for that matter. It seems very abrupt in Estonian. Not like, this is none of your business, or this is none of my business, but how does this touch on you, and what interest is this of ours? This is somebody else's problem. And then the final bit, my time has not yet come. And I think if you put all of these things together, what Jesus is saying is listen, I'm here for a different kind of purpose. This isn't what I'm here for. It's not about party tricks. It's not about solving these kinds of problems. That my time to reveal myself, the revelation that's meant for me is something much, much different from this. And we see that by the end of the Gospel of John, his grandest revelation is in his crucifixion and resurrection. It's not simply in miracle doing or even in proclamation. It's in the giving of himself for the good of all humankind. But he's building up to that. And this is in some ways a foretaste of that. One of the things that I take away from all this is that Jesus is not a victim of his circumstances. He enters into circumstances. He enters into this wedding. He's there as a guest. He's there as a participant. He's fully active. He's fully engaged. But he's no victim of his circumstances. And even when people come to him with a request that he engage on a deeper level, he is very aware of his own purposes and what he is heading towards. So he doesn't disengage with our circumstances. He's fully engaged, but he engages towards his own purposes. But now to the solution. What does Jesus do? If he's determining his own purposes and so on and so forth, what does he do to solve this situation? Well, the situation is interesting. He looks around. He takes the opportunity that's presented. There are 6 stone jars. Our passage says 6 stone jars that are used for cleansing. And this is interesting. These aren't just regular stone jars. They're used by the Jews for ritual cleansing. They're not like your typical Tupperware bucket that you'd use to present drinks in or something like that. No, these are for a particular purpose, and the volume that they carry is 100 liters, which, darn it, I don't remember in gallons. Let's say 50 gallons. I think there's 2 liters in a gallon. Something like that, isn't it? Anyway, 50 gallons, 6 of them, that means 300 gallons of wine. If we stick to liters for the moment, it's a little bit easier to do the math. 300 liters. No, I got that wrong. 600 liters of wine. 600 liters. If you think about 750 milliliters in a wine bottle, you put that together in liters, you get 188. Is that right? 188 bottles? 133 bottles. Give me a second, I'll do the math. Just a side note, by the way, I don't think there are any laws against eating and driving or preaching and driving. If you know that there are, then let me know. I'll do my next sermon in a different setting. Anyway, 750 milliliters in a bottle, 133 bottles in a 100-gallon jug, 133 times 6, what would that be? 800 bottles of wine at the end of the party. So we're talking about overabundance. I mean, Jesus is not just, I've heard commentators say that this overabundance is demonstrated by the fact that it's now at the end of the party and people are most likely drunk. Well, this is at the end of a 5-day party. So we're not even talking about drunkenness. We're talking about party favors. Everybody takes home 2 quality bottles of wine at the end of a 5-day party. I mean, this is really extravagant. But there's something else that's happening here, and I think part of what Jesus is saying by using this moment, by taking this circumstance, that the circumstance is not of his own making.
Incoming call from Lee Edminster.
Look, that's what happens when I preach and
Press
drive.
New Connect phone button to...
Jesus is using this moment in his ministry to do a miracle of transformation. He's using an opportune moment at a time of crisis, a crisis not of his own choosing, but one that he's he's willing to enter into on behalf of somebody else. And in the midst of that crisis, he uses this to make a transformation. And this transformation comes on different levels. It happens chemically. So water turning into wine is not an additive process. It's not the same as adding Kool-Aid powder. You're moving from H2O to alcohol, which is, what is alcohol? Do you remember? Got here. Kevin is right here next to me. Not that he would know about alcohol, but he might know the chemistry. Anyway, we have a change of substance, a change of substance that normally is carried out over the course of days through the process of fermentation, in which we have biological machinery that does the processing of sugars into alcohol and CO2. And now this is done miraculously in the course of moments, if not milliseconds, by Jesus. It's a complete change of substance from one chemical structure to another. It's also on the level of event. We go from a broken event to a restored event, where the reputation of a young man and his wife, of course, is restored. Instead of being subjected to embarrassment, he is now in a position where his guests are deeply grateful to him. This is a culture in which gift giving and reciprocity is highly, highly valued. And so Jesus has taken a real embarrassment of a situation and turned it into something that really would make for a famous wedding, whether people knew what was behind it or not. But it's not only on that level, it's also on the level of this whole contents of the jar. It's not only what's within the jar, it's the jar itself. These jars, these stone jars, were used for purification. We're talking about a culture that's very concerned about purity, especially purity associated with various sacred events. And Jesus is saying, I think, in this event, that the way that you have done things up until now has reached a critical moment. It's a critical moment, and you've run out of the things that you need to carry this to its completion. You know what? I think that there's another level going on. This is not just talking about a replacement for the Jewish way of doing things. I'm not talking about Judaism in the sense of Israel as a nation. I'm talking about as a religious question. Jesus is saying this is a replacement, but he's also saying something to us as human beings. You and I, as human beings, are going to reach a point in our life where we do not have the substance, the appropriate substance anymore to complete the job, and it usually comes to pass right at the critical moment. This is true of us individually. It's true of us as people. I'm sure you can think back to moments in your life where you realized, this is the moment where I most need to be the person I was made to be, and I don't have the stuff to make it happen. I just don't have it in me. Whether it's energy, whether it's wisdom, education, integrity, could be any number of different levels. But we come to a crisis point in our life where at the moment that we most need to be what we should be, what we are meant to be, we just can't do it on our own. And Jesus is saying, I'm here to enter into your reality. Part of my mission is to enter into the reality of what it means to be human, to enter into the crisis, to be there by your side in the moment of crisis, and not just to be there to comfort you, but to transform it from the inside out. And you know what? I think it's more than just personal. I think cultures come to this moment as well. And I got to be honest with you, folks. You know, looking at American politics, looking at the trajectory of our culture over the last 10, 20, 30 years, could be that we've come to a crisis point where we have run out of the stuff that we need to be what it is that we were called to be. And if that's true, then it wouldn't be such a great surprise that what we are called to do is to look to the Christ. Look to Jesus Christ, who enters into these things as a matter of course, who by virtue of his incarnation has entered into our reality, not just once in the history of humankind, but as a matter of habit, enters into our reality, enters into the moment of crisis, and offers a transformative solution from within. I think sometimes we think of God as solving our problems from high up above, up in the heavens, looking down. We know that Jesus is sitting at the right hand of the Father, interceding on our behalf. But passages like this tell us that part of Jesus' character is to enter in personally into the midst of our chaos and to offer transformation. And maybe the question is only, what way are we going to respond? Are we going to respond, continue to look for our own solutions, or will we do what Mary recommended to or commanded to the servants, which is do whatever he tells you to do? That would be the wise thing to do, would be allow Jesus to take the reins at that point and to work towards transformation, not just a solution to the situation, not just a polite solution, not just a one step up, but a complete transformation of the substance of what's really going on. Now I'm getting into Tiptund traffic. That's rush hour traffic. So I can't stay focused on both things at the same time. But here's the thing. This is actually a good metaphor for the point of this whole thing. It's crisis time. It's crisis time. And it may be crisis time globally. It may be crisis time nationally. But in the end, the only thing that matters is what happens in your life. You and I, we can vote. We can do whatever we want to do to be civic or to be global. But at the end of the day, it comes down to what's happening in our life and what we do with the crises that occur in our lives. The first question is this: do you believe that Jesus is actually entering into your crisis? He says he is. He's demonstrated that he is. But are you willing to look around and try to recognize where he is in the midst of your mess? If your mess is like my mess, it stinks. It's a little shameful. And it's uncomfortable. And yet, I think that Jesus is somewhere in the midst of all that, waiting for you to recognize where he is. So look around. Do you recognize where Jesus is in the middle of your mess? And two, are you willing to allow him to transform? What is it in this mess that needs to be transformed? I'm not talking cosmetics. I'm not talking about what would make things more comfortable. There's something in the middle of our mess that needs to be transformed. Can you be honest about that with him? Third, are you willing to do whatever he tells you to do? Are you willing to take Mary's advice? Do whatever he tells you to do, she said. Take a second to think about that while I drive through traffic.
Sulanda matahan vaid seda, mis kalliks pead sa. Kõik kombed ja tavad, mis tühjad ma jätta tahan. Sa ei oota vaid südant, mis kuulub sulle vaid. Nii seisan su ees ma ja tahan vaid sulle kuuluda. Vähem mind ja rohkem Jeesust. 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 Sa võta mu süda ja puhasta kõigest tühisest. Sa hoia ja mind kanna, ma vajan su armu iga päev.
So let me end with this. This miracle is meant for us. It's a transformation. It's the turning of a situation into something completely different. But it's also a revelation. It's a revelation of who Jesus is. It's what theologians call a Christophany. So he's revealing who he is. You'll notice in chapter 1 that when John introduces Jesus, he introduces him through the testimony of John the Baptist. He introduces him according to the testimony of creation. In the beginning was the Word. He introduces him according to the testimony of 3 of his disciples, and each of these testimonies reveals a different aspect of who Christ is. Here in the very beginning, the very first act that Jesus takes in the Gospel of John, he's revealing himself. He's revealing something about what it means to actually be the Christ, to be Jesus, to be our Lord. And what he's revealing is that he's the kind of Christ that gets involved into the middle of a situation with us. He doesn't just save us out of our situations. He gets into the middle of it and does something new, transforms it from the inside out. I've been reading a fellow recently who is talking about what it means for Christians to participate in God, especially in terms of church. What does it mean for us to participate in the life of God? And he argues that every time that Jesus reveals himself, he's also revealing God. It's not just a Christophany, it's also a theophany, which means that when we know something more about Jesus, we learn something more about God. And you see this in the Old Testament as well, that God, when he saves his people out of Egypt, he comes and dwells in the midst of them, that he resides, encamps himself in the middle of their camp, and he transforms them as they walk through the desert on their way to Canaan. This is the kind of God that we serve. It's not just Jesus, it's not just his son, this isn't just a special mission, this is part of who he is, part of what makes him special. And when we enter into relationship with him, it becomes a part of who we are too. And so this is not just about Christ, it's about us. It's an anthropony. Did I say that right? It's a revelation of what it means to be human. What it means for us to be truly human is that we also get involved. We dwell in one another's, enter into one another's situations, and we work to transform them from the inside out. I hope this finds you well. I've tried to include you in my day to let you a little bit into the reality that I live on a daily basis, at least the places, not all the situations. I guess you guys want to say hi? Just wave. Glad that we can be with you guys. Glad that you can be with us, and hope this message is a blessing to you. Blessings to you. We keep you in our prayers. Love you lots.